The only way we could attain any type of social status or any type of way to like elevate ourselves was to marry men,
Hmm.
was to, have children and establish ourselves in the community, you know? But now that women have more options, now we're struggling with the idea of like, well, what does this look like for me? There aren't that
Hmm.
many Latinas in the boardroom, or when I look at the board of directors, they don't look like me or come from my background. So how is this supposed to look? And that adds to that insecurity of like, well, what do we do?
If you want to make more money in your career, that means you often need to negotiate, ask for what you deserve. But how do you do that if you're not even comfortable talking about money to begin with? Well, we are here to help. Hi, I'm Diana Burnell, a career strategist guiding ambitious Latinas through major career moves. Today, I speak with Stephanie Olano. She's a financial trauma coach and healer about the ways we view money and how to get over the baggage we may have carried or are still carrying so that way we can use money to lead the life we want. Let's talk to Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, a lot of my work is with career professionals, with Latina professionals who are trying to get ahead in their careers,
Mhm.
right? They are trying to climb the corporate ladder, whatever that might be. And often money will come up, whether they want to make more money or some are grappling with a decision to make a lateral move or even take a cut in pay. And fears and concerns around money often come up when it comes to careers, but sometimes they are a little bit deeper. And that's financial trauma. So I would love to hear from you about some of the issues that you see from Latinas who are dealing with financial trauma.
Well, the first thing is they don't know it's financial trauma. Financial trauma and anxiety, those are very new concepts. They came out of some interesting things that were happening in the pandemic.
Mm.
So I don't know if you were seeing this on your end, but a lot of people for the first time in their lives, they could actually save money. Stores weren't open, people were only buying the essentials, people just didn't want to take the risk, and they weren't quite sure what was going to happen with their job. So
Mhm.
they were able to save, and the rest of the world was able to match their values or their intentions. And yeah, a lot of some amount of wealth was able to be generated in that time. But when things started opening up and unfortunately layoffs were happening, a lot of these symptoms that I was seeing as trauma or anxiety in my mental health clients were happening, were being triggered with finances. And I was like,
Mm.
there's something here. Like, what
Mhm.
is happening? And then the phrase financial trauma was starting to kind of be out there, be published, or
Mhm.
just being talked about more. But a lot of my clients were just so unaware about what that symptoms or what that could look like, in especially in the Latinx community.
Well, let's talk about those symptoms. What does
Mhm.
that look like? I don't know if this is sort of the fight or flight system where people are either hoarding all their money or they're spending it like mad. I mean, what are some of the things that you see?
So it's actually could be both. So generally what happens with trauma, it's really the body's way of like, okay, I'm sensing something is causing danger. I'm sensing something is happening and I'm not quite sure what's happening. So what the newer research is saying with trauma is like our nervous system is very susceptible to those types of triggers. And when we were living in caves or living in the jungle, or before 21st century type of living, that system was necessary. Like we needed to hear or
Mhm.
sense like there's danger behind a bush or a tiger's chasing after me. So the amygdala needs to give me a way to respond to that situation, right? But now that we're in the 21st century and we're still responding in that way, like there's a tiger chasing us, that's where it's like, okay, now I need to figure out what's happening, because we're just so unaware of like
Mhm.
what could be triggering.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
what I saw in my clients was, oh, I'm avoiding opening the bill. Oh, I am impulse spending. I know I need to save money. I know I need to put this away, but I always give the example of spending $500 and saying F you credit card, like I just need to spend more. That's again the trauma response. So what I try to explain to folks is there's a scanner in our body, and
Mhm.
that scanner is called the nervous system. And when we are susceptible to things like trauma, like maybe something happened in the past, maybe something's happening in the workplace now, but either way, we have the scanner. If it is sensitive or it's somehow just a little bit overwhelmed or cluttered with so much information, it's going to start reacting automatically, even without us noticing or checking in, like, wait, why
Mhm.
am I doing this?
Mhm.
This
Yeah.
part of the brain isn't communicating with the rest of the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
So we need to start kind of recognizing, like, oh, wait, it's bottom up, it's body, then mind, and eventually
Mhm.
start having the two operate on the same page. But
Yeah.
that can be kind of hard in the beginning because again, our scanners are just going off, doing their own thing, and just making decisions for you. So we need to
Yeah.
start noticing and being more aware that's happening in the first place.
So you're a financial trauma coach. Explain how you work with your clients and a little bit about your background too.
Yeah. So my day job is marriage and family therapy. I went to grad school, wanted to become a therapist, and I still am. I have my private practice.
Mhm.
I started it during the pandemic. But again, during the pandemic, when all this research and all these phrases were coming out about financial trauma, a lot of my clients were coming to me about, well, I have money concerns. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm not an accountant. Like, I don't know what to tell you. But what I started to notice was, oh, wait, I could actually do something about this. No, I can't necessarily help you with bills or help you figure out if you need to invest or not, but I could help you unpack, like, what is the feeling here? What is like happening with your thoughts and, the tension in your body and, all the things that come before paying your bills. And then
Mhm.
after, because
Mhm.
after we pay that bill, we still have some feeling, like we're still having some anxiety. So those were the
Yeah.
symptoms I more or less focused on with my clients and started to have really interesting conversations about.
Yeah. And if I think about my own experience in dealing with money, I think about the financial insecurity that I grew up with, right? That
Mhm.
kind of makes me, in some levels, kind of cheap. Not always, but I'm a little bit more conservative when it comes to spending my money. So I would imagine that some of the women that you work with came from financial insecurity. So tell me about those conversations and some of the things that we can either look out for or try and, wrap our arms around that.
I think what people kind of underestimate is how our experience, like whether we're Latinx or Latina or however, whatever cultural background we come from, we are like children of immigrants. So that does come with certain baggage. You know,
Hmm.
I know for my family, they came from places like Nicaragua and El Salvador. So there is this
Hmm.
kind of mistrust of systems like the
Mhm,
government or
mhm,
banks. So
mhm,
that's kind of prevalent in my communities. But also what we need to understand is like, if it is something like that insecure mindset or that scarcity mindset, there's probably like justification for it. Like
mhm,
trauma isn't always like our enemy or it's something that we need to overcome. It is a source of protection. It is
mhm,
kind of like our first line of defense. And in a way, it's kind of helped us get to this point so far, but
mhm,
now we're trying to say like, no, it's we have to break away from it or we need to like do something different. And when we're coming from a place of trauma, that's really saying like, you're taking away the only safety I know.
interesting.
Whenever we use terms like, oh, I'm a little cheap or I'm a little this and a little that, it's like, no, like you've survived, like you've made decisions that got you
Yeah,
this far, but let's
yeah,
add more to it. Maybe you don't want to make those certain decisions the same way because maybe you didn't feel good. Maybe you
mhm,
kind of want to, you're in a different setting or different environment
mhm,
now. So you just
mhm.
want to add more to just, maybe cutting back or, eliminating expenses.
Yeah. And I think about how I relate to other people. Like when it comes to my friends or my children, I am generous as all get out. I will pick up your
Mhm.
lunch. I will let them buy the things that they're looking to buy. But when it comes to me, I go to Nordstrom Rack first or I go to Marshall's first because I'm expecting to buy something on sale. It took me a long time to say, no, I can just walk into Bloomingdale's and buy the blazer or buy the purse or buy the thing. I mean, it takes years to unpack this stuff.
Yeah, and I don't blame you for going to Nordstrom Rack. I think we talked about this a little bit before, but I think buying retail's for suckers. Like I don't understand anyone who like, oh, I just spent like full price on this, and I'm like, how is that a brag? Like I don't
Yeah.
understand that. But I think that also comes from our culture. Like we always are like you were considered like pretty cool if you got something on the cheap or on a budget.
Mhm,
You were
mhm.
financially responsible,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
and
think
why would you wanna give that up?
The younger generation definitely embraces thrifting. Like, why
Yeah.
would they buy something full price? For sure. So it's interesting to see that generational shift. So let's talk a little bit more about family, because
Yes.
that comes up a lot. You know, the expectations, especially around Latina women, and what other people expect us to be. And especially when it comes around money, you know, a lot of people expect the men to be the primary breadwinner, or they just
Mhm.
expect the Latina to be in the corner, right? So, talk a little bit about these family expectations that we have and how this shows up in your work.
I think the big thing is like the gender roles.
Hmm.
Machismo is a thing, and the other side of it is Marianismo.
Hmm.
For Marianismo, that is kind of like the feminine ideal. Like we're supposed to be like the Virgin Mary. We're supposed to be self-sacrificing, quiet, and you know have regalness when we're crying or being upset. Because again, she could withstand seeing her son die on the cross, and very high standard for women. Like unattainable, but of course like they made it unattainable for us.
Yeah.
Whereas and not to cause blame to men or machismo in that culture, but there kind of is this pressure of like, well, you are solely responsible for the finances, and they take it as like a power trip there. Like, oh, without me, like we wouldn't be living in this house, or we wouldn't be able to pay for food. And it's like, okay, now you're kind of making it like a power struggle, and I'm not trying
Hmm.
to do
Hmm.
that. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, women, we just don't have the tools or the knowledge on like, well, how do I get the power? Because like money is power, and
Hmm.
for a lot of us, the only way we could attain any type of social status or any type of way to like elevate ourselves was to marry men,
Hmm.
was to, have children and establish ourselves in the community, you know? But now that women have more options, now we're struggling with the idea of like, well, what does this look like for me? There aren't that
Hmm.
many Latinas in the boardroom, or when I look at the board of directors, they don't look like me or come from my background. So, how is this supposed to look? And that adds to that insecurity of like, well, what do we do?
Right.
So really it's just a matter of like the path that was provided for us, very limiting.
Hmm.
But now it's the opposite effect of like, okay, now we have the whole universe, but what do we do with that? Because again,
Right.
like we the only way to elevate ourselves is hopefully like we're being guided in, or we're being taught lessons, or we're just talking to people. But a lot of us, like, we don't have those opportunities.
And I think it's been generations and generations of these behaviors, right? Like you mentioned, even
Hmm.
the men, you know, on one level, we can't entirely blame the men because they've been raised to expect a certain
Yeah.
thing. So for them, they need to break their cycle of how they view women in the workplace or women in the family. But so much of it is on us that we have to stand our ground and say, you know what? These are the things I want. These are my values and goals and ambitions. And there's a way to balance everything. There is a way to be a working parent. There is a way to socialize with your family and friends, but still be this career woman. So much of it has to do with gratitude. I want to talk about gratitude because you had a blog post that really
Yeah.
caught my interest. And I think that's why we're here today, where you said sometimes gratitude can feel like an obligation. Can you
Hmm.
explain what you meant by that?
I think the title of that, Gratitude Sucks, kind of. Kind of.
More or less. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So really, I have certain qualms with the term gratitude because
Okay.
it can be turned into this toxic positivity thing, like,
Mhm.
oh, you're struggling, but look to gratitude. It's that whole like, well, the Virgin Mary could take it, so you should learn how to sit with your pain as well. And it's just that old adage of like, well, Latinas especially, like, we need to self-sacrifice and expect
Mhm.
pain in some
Mhm.
ways, or turn to your resiliency. But
Mhm.
when we look at those things, it is a trauma response. It's coming out of a place that's like wrapped in struggle and pain, and not enough room for joy or contentment,
Mhm.
you know
Mhm.
and to expect more, or maybe slightly more stability, we're considered ungrateful,
Right.
or like, how dare you?
Right.
So I always tell my clients, like, okay, gratitude is great. If that works for you, fine. But if you feel like, maybe you're forcing yourself, or you need to kind of how somehow like spin it to
Mhm.
make it more positive,
Mhm.
let's just be more aware, like, maybe gratitude is not the thing. Maybe we need
Mhm.
to acknowledge there's something really messed up here,
Mhm.
and we can't always be grateful for systems of oppression. We can't always be grateful for that comes out of like racism and sexism or limiting opportunities. Like that's really messed up.
Yeah.
And to say to people, especially coming from like typical money management, like use your gratitude journal. I'm like, that's great. It's just not enough.
Yeah, yeah. And this is, I think, also overlapping a little bit with shame, right? Let's talk about shame, right? That's such a fun
Hmm.
topic that Brene Brown has made an everyday conversation. But I do see it in the women that I work with that they look at the amount of money they make. And they
Hmm.
make so much more than their parents. It's almost embarrassing to them. And
Yeah.
they feel like this should be enough. I should settle. I should not want more. But it's okay. And what I try to get across is we can have both. We can be grateful for what we
Hmm.
have, everything, this house, these clothes, this jewelry, but we can still be ambitious. And ambition
Yeah.
may require going after a bigger job. It may be asking for more money. We can do both of those things.
Yeah. I don't disagree. And I think for a lot of us, ambition, it's not really a feminine thing. Like when we think ambition, I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot
Mm-hmm.
of our instincts are like, well, that's what men do. That's what my
Mm-hmm.
dad did. He was ambitious. We're supposed to be
Yeah.
passionate. Passion
Yes.
is more feminine, but
Yes.
ambition that does require some organization and some not just intentions, but like you need a plan to be considered
Yeah.
ambitious. Like you want to be
Yeah.
CEO, guess what? You need a business plan. If
Well,
you want to get your graduate degree, guess what? You need to
mm-hmm.
figure out if you need to apply and, do the financial aid route, if you need a student loan, like that takes some organization, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again,
And
we just don't have that model of like, what does this look like for me?
right, because when we hear about a young man being ambitious, sorry guys, but if you hear
Yeah.
about a young man being ambitious, that's what we expect them to do, right? But when you
Yeah.
hear about a woman being ambitious, well, then she's tough, or we can use all the other words, she's bitchy, and it doesn't have the same positive polish that it does when applied to a young male. But we've got to
Yeah. And
walk that back and say it's okay to be ambitious. Ambitious just means you want to get ahead. What is wrong with that?
yeah. And I feel bad for my male clients. I also work with men as well. And I have these same conversations on like, why is it only your responsibility to, make this money or be ambitious? Because that
Mhm.
taking it on your own in any
Mhm.
situation is
Mhm.
unfair.
Yeah.
The whole part of this bigger conversation of one, we can't do this alone.
Yeah.
So how do we find a system or,
Yeah.
support system or community where you can kind of relinquish some of that responsibility, but
Mhm.
also have open conversations on like, this is a lot. Like this is just
Mhm.
too much, or, I am struggling with being grateful, but also I just resent,
Mm.
having all of this
Mhm.
placed on me because a lot of
Yeah.
this stuff came out of survival. It is
Yeah.
a lot of whether it's elders or, perceived observation of like, I'm the one that needs to step in and
Mhm.
do this for the
Mhm.
family. It's still a lot, even if we
It's
do it
deep.
voluntarily.
Yeah, and you mentioned Marianismo before, and this is all falls into that. We actually have an episode, I think it's number 406, but we did a whole episode on Marianismo and all these traits. But women, or those who identify as women, cannot be the only ones having these conversations. We need to have
Hmm.
these conversations with our hermanos, our brothers, the boyfriends. That way they start to hear these things, and many of them would be open, but they just don't even know because, they're not thinking about it. They're not worried about how is she going to, embrace her worth today? This is
Hmm.
our job. But if we bring them into the conversation, I don't know if any of your clients have that success with talking to their partners about these roles.
It's always like, I think that's like a 3 to 6 month process just to have the first conversation. Um, a lot of my a lot of my initial hand holding is like, we need to start letting people in. We need to start asking for
Mm,
help. We need
mm-hmm,
to start having the hard conversation and that comes from my mental health background too. So it's great that someone wants to do the trauma work and really wants to enact change and
mm-hmm,
really wants to like figure out like, how do I do things better? So if we're looking at model of addiction,
mm,
if someone really wants to stop drinking or doing substances, it's great that you're going to meetings. It's great that you're doing therapy. Wonderful that you're doing the hard work.
mm-hmm.
But addiction doesn't always impact the individual. It is a family disease. It is
Mm,
a family problem. So what's really going to be beneficial, and at least a lot of the therapists that I work with say it this way too, but like you need a second agent of change. You need someone in your family or in your close-knit circle to say, what can I do to support you to make sure that you don't drink again?
mhm,
Or when you do drink, like there is a plan in place to keep you safe and you're
mhm,
not going off the rails, you
mm,
know? Because
mhm,
again, it can't
mhm.
just be the individual making a
Right.
change. It has to be the people and the environment has to help you support those decisions as well.
Yeah. So how long do you work with clients really? I mean, this could take months because it didn't just happen
Mhm.
overnight. You're working with people who are
Yeah.
probably 30 something, maybe younger, but they probably have had these messages and behaviors around them for decades. So breaking
Yeah.
that breaking that cycle takes a long time.
So part of it is like I understand because I'm dealing with trauma and anxiety and around money. These are
Yeah.
just things that people are not comfortable talking
Mhm.
with or want to, commit to a year to
Mhm.
see me. So I have different levels. I have my money safety plan, which is a 2-hour session, and
Mm,
that's where we
mhm.
discuss like what happened, how do we make sure that you have a plan to next time you want to make a budget or you pay that bill, you're not always like having a panic attack. So
Mhm.
there's that.
Mhm.
The level up from that is like my 3-month program, and
Mhm.
that's again the money session, but also we figure out, a financial self-care routine that is
Mm.
realistic for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then the 6-month plan, that's my longest running program. That's where we're like, okay, we meet every other week. And I hold you accountable. I send you text messages, I send you
Yeah.
emails and figure out like what is going on with your financial habits and how do we set new ones and ones that, again, that are realistic so you can continue the changes on your own when you're done seeing me after 6 months.
Yeah, and you and I started this conversation because I wanted to talk about how money fits in with women's careers and how we
Mhm.
need to get comfortable with money, start asking for money, but it also is in everything else we do for enjoying our lives, right? So I joked that I'm cheap, and it's funny because I bet you my kids would not think that I'm cheap. But when it comes to like vacation spending, there is a
Mhm.
joke in our house. If it weren't for me, because I'm the organized one, right? We would not be able to come home is the joke. Like if it weren't for my husband, he pushes us. Like we went to Australia a few years ago. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't go on vacation. If it weren't for me, we wouldn't come home because I am the more organized one and I'm the one who
Mm.
plans the budget and things like that. But there is a balance between legacy and memory, or at least this is what my financial advisor said. We're talking right now, we're at this pivotal stage where we got kids in college, we got
Mhm.
retirement on the horizon. Like, what do you want more of now? And I don't need to die with $5 million. I certainly hope I don't die with $5 million. I want to spend and I want my kids to have whatever it is that they need to be successful in life. So there's a lot of decision making going on. And it sounds like what you're trying to do is give them a better foundation so they can make the decisions that reflect the values that they really have.
Yeah, because again, what you brought up before was like we will hoard the money. If there was an option between hoarding and spending, a lot of us would most likely hoard
Mm-hmm.
because it's
Mm-hmm.
safer there. That's what we've seen, that's what we know. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea of spending, like I think for a lot of our listeners will be like, "Oh, wait, like you're trying to spend? Like wait, it wasn't the whole point to like
Mm-hmm.
make sure the number keeps climbing and to make sure it stays there? Like what are you trying to
Mm-hmm.
do?" But
Mm-hmm.
living in a capitalist society, that kind of is the point. Like to enjoy your
Mm-hmm.
life, you do need to
Mm-hmm.
spend money. It's not just
Yeah.
to have this number keep increasing. It's to go on
Right.
vacations. It's to make sure your kids have, access to funds if they want to go to college or maybe want their
Mm-hmm.
first apartment or whatever
Mm-hmm.
financial goals you have in mind. You
Mm-hmm.
need to spend money to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's where I had to come around that spending money is okay. Having savings is important, especially if we are making career changes too, because what happens is sometimes people get desperate and they take a job that is lower in pay because they're afraid they're not
Hmm.
going to get an offer next week or 3 months from now. But if you have a financial cushion, you can take the time to find that right job for you. So it's balancing out everything in your life and just making sure that you have at least what you need in different segments or different stages. And I don't know how you help women look at or people look at the different stages that they're in.
So there's like two ways of thinking of it.
Mhm,
So the money situation can trigger, like that can trigger anxiety or panic
mhm,
attacks, or
mhm.
you're in the pit and you're not quite sure what's going to happen. Or we can turn it into glimmers. Glimmers is where it's like, okay, I'm not in the best situation I'm in, but
Mhm.
what's a way that I can at least kind of look for or hope for, or, yes, I'm struggling, but I won't always be struggling.
Yeah,
That's a
glimmers
glimmer.
of hope. Glimmers of hope,
Hmm.
glimmers of light at the end. Okay, so let's try and get people at least a little more comfortable, right? They've heard you, this is interesting, they're going to follow your blog and the such. What might be a few things that our Latinas listening can do to try and get to a better relationship, a healthier, I don't want to use better as a qualifier, a healthier
Hmm.
relationship with money? What might be some simple things that we can do?
So I think the first thing that every financial advisor or consultant always says is like, actually look at the numbers.
Hmm.
Actually figure out like what is happening to your money, where it's going. Are you aware of like what you're spending your money on? That
Hmm.
has to be the first step. Without that, because in any relationship, you gotta get to know the person, right? How are you
You
gonna
gotta
know
get to
the
know your
person
wallet. You gotta
if
get to
you're
know
like,
your checkbook.
yeah, but if you're like avoiding their phone calls or you're just trying to like ghost them, like what type of
Yeah,
relationship are you
yeah.
gonna have? You know?
Mm,
So
mm,
first we got to
mm.
get to know like we got to get to know this person or the numbers,
Okay,
you know?
okay.
And do we like what we
All right.
see? Do we like what's
Mm,
happening? If not,
mhm,
guess what? Like we got to start we got to start being curious like what changes do we need to start making, you know? And that could be financial literacy. There's tons of stuff on YouTube. I have a YouTube as
mhm.
well, so if you are
Yes,
curious about that,
yeah.
like start asking the hard questions, but basically we got to start being more aware cuz going off
Mhm,
of like autopilot or assuming or, just hoping for the best but not really knowing, that's the
mhm.
trauma response. That's your
Yeah,
body and your mind saying like, "You don't really know how to handle this. We'll just ignore it and go through the avoidance right now." That's comforting, but it's a
mhm,
short-term solution. We need to start
mhm.
thinking bigger and more long-term solution.
And thinking that someone else is going to solve the problem, getting back to the Latina family expectation, no partner, no spouse is here to save you. They might make less money than you. They may not work at all. You know, you might fall in love with someone who is in an entirely different financial stratosphere, you know. So this has got to be about what you do to take control of your finances. So that way you get the things, you get the type of lifestyle you want. Because one of the things I talked about a few weeks ago was how our careers and our decisions are a reflection of our values. So guess what? Your ATM card, if you look at your statement from the last month, that will tell you what's important to you.
Yeah. And part of my sessions is really like your money core values. So, do you actually want all your money to be going to places like Amazon or Target? Because that also may impact like our community. They
Mm-hmm.
sign up for
Mm-hmm.
policies or laws that I personally do not agree with, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of folks in our community are not aware that, wait, what does Target have to do with like this local election? A lot, a
Oh,
lot.
trust me.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I have
and
two Gen Z kids, and we were shopping for gym shoes, and she had the app out, and she was looking online at a certain I don't know if it was a website or whatever. She didn't want to buy shoes from certain companies because of
mhm.
their involvement in certain things. So that generation certainly has it under control. Okay, so some awareness, some reflection, maybe a little bit of trial and error, like to kind of like dip your toe into one of those areas, whether you're trying to spend more or to actually enjoy life a little more.
Yeah, and that's what awkward money is really about. Like, it's trial and error. You're going to make mistakes. And it's
Mm.
not to be less awkward. Like, it's actually to embrace the awkwardness. Like, there's going to be times where you're like, am I doing this right? Like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Like, I
Mhm.
don't know if I want my money to look that way. Own it. That's okay. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to, you don't have to be perfect, you
Yeah.
know? As long as, and it's going to take many, many steps to be in a situation where you're going to lose your home, you're going to, lose everything, or like those take multiple phases.
Mhm.
You messing up on like paying your credit card on time
Mhm.
or not being as mindful to like look up what companies are doing with their money, that's
Mhm.
okay. Like we're
Mhm.
here to make mistakes and, let go of the criticism that comes with all of that.
Letting go of the shame. There it is.
Hmm.
It comes back to it. Okay, so you mentioned Awkward Money. Tell us where people can find you and they can find Awkward Money.
Yeah, so I'm very prevalent on Instagram. My handle is Awk Money, so AWK Money. For those who grew up in the 2000s, Awk was short for awkward, little internet slang there. But you can also find me on awkwardmoney.com. And I mentioned I'm starting a YouTube. That too is also Awk Money.
Yes. And some of these are free
Yeah,
resources. Can we talk about free?
yeah,
There's so much free stuff. This
yes.
podcast, your podcast. I mean, let's go ahead and take advantage of what is available to us. I mean, and that's sort of the beauty of part of the upside of the internet, right? Is that there is so much good information out there. You have to slice out the bad. You have to take, everything with a grain of salt and figure out what works for you. And then you do have to get to that point where, okay, I've done this all for free for the last 3 to 6 months. If you still need more help, then maybe there are some paid resources. But I'm so grateful that you have those resources available. And I'm so grateful. I am grateful the upside that you took the time to be with us today. Thank you so much, Stephanie. This was terrific.
No, thanks for having me and thank you for these awesome questions. And yeah, I'm just glad we're getting it out there because, again, not all of us see that representation. So I'm glad you're here creating a platform for all of us out here.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'll come up to the Bay Area and visit you in person soon.
Love it.
Okay.
Love to have you over.
Take care. Thank you for listening. For more, visit cornerofficelatinas.com, where we give you the framework, inspiration, and support you need to reach and thrive in the corner office. We have some free downloads on the website, where you can also sign up for our e-news, so we can keep you posted on workshops and events coming up that you will not want to miss. That's cornerofficelatinas.com. See you next week.